Hi guys, welcome back to another video. This is one of my friends, so I'm sorry in advance. You're probably gonna see lots of goofy clips of her because she is just a silly goose. But we are doing, as you guys can see, a huge I-tip transformation. We used 5 packs of I-tips, so that is like between 100 and 125 grams of hair, basically. This is her wedding hair. She gets married in a few weeks, so I had to get my girl right, and didn't want to leave you guys hanging without a tutorial. So let's go ahead and get started. So I showed a little bit of me prepping the hair first. So I got a Body Wave bundle from Bellamy Hair. The Body Wave bundles come in like more of a S wave situation, so I don't like fully straighten them per se, but I do like to calm down the wave just so it's a little bit easier to install it. So I like to get the extensions damp really quick, and then I like smooth it out a little bit. So that's all I really have to do, and then obviously like loading up my loop tool too. So here I am getting started sectioning off. I have changed, and when you take extension classes, a lot of times they're gonna say to start in the back. I don't really do that anymore on big transformations like this. I like to start in the front when I'm like truly changing like the overall look of their hair. If it's like a density placement or something like that, I might not. But I have the most mental energy for the beginning of the service, for one. And for two, starting in the front just really helps to like really set the overall look, and then it makes it honestly easier for me for the back, which like, okay, yeah, the back, like everyone cares for, don't get me wrong, but like, we all care about the front a little more. So I just feel like I'm really able to like really customize it and have the most mental energy for it in the front, and I feel like then it makes the back then easier. I'm just kind of like finishing it all up, where I feel like when I am starting in the back for these transformations and then coming to the front, I feel like I have to be like super on from start to finish, and I'm like way more mentally taxed out. I don't feel like I'm able to like really, because the back has already been laid out, so I kind of have to follow that lead, and so I don't feel like I'm always able to like, I don't know, like I don't feel like I have as much creative control, if that makes sense. So I like to start in the front. So I've said this before in my other extension video. I'll probably say these in all my extension videos. This is not, don't watch this video and take, your first extension model or your first extension client. This is more so geared towards if you already do extensions, if you're familiar with extensions and maybe you just need like a refresher on I-tips, or like if you're debating on if you want to start doing extensions and you just want to watch some videos, or you just want like advanced continued ed and you already do I-tips. But please don't let this video be your only source of education for individual tip extensions before you start to, do this as a service behind the chair, because I am not going to be, giving like a step-by-step on how to do it. I'm going to be more so like just explaining per client, if that makes sense. Same thing with my color tutorials. I'm not expecting you to do your first highlight, based off of that. So just like to throw that out there. Now, my client has thicker hair. She has pretty high density, and her strands are pretty thick too. So with that, but her thickness kind of varies. So here in this area right by the ear, her hair is a little bit more finer. So I had to go and make my U-shaped sections. As you guys can kind of see, I'm having to kind of bring them down a little bit lower. Her hair is a little bit finer. Her density is a little finer in like her temple area and below, between the temple and the ears. And then her texture gets quite a bit thicker, the top and like her top crown part of her head. So you'll actually see me having to kind of fluctuate and take smaller U-shaped partings as I work my way up to the top. So That's something that, you definitely kind of have to be mindful of when you're doing individual extensions, is just like what the density and the thickness is like because everyone's density and thickness can change. Their overall texture can change from different parts of the head. I know, even myself included, like my hair texture is different, in different parts of my head. So that's why I like doing individuals. That's why I specialize in them, because I am just someone that is so mindful of people's textures that I feel like I'm able to truly customize the extensions based off their texture in that specific spot. And it can be, like I keep saying, just extremely customizable from row to row to row. Even more to that, it can be customizable from bond to bond to bond, so that's why I like to specialize in them. So I'm saying all that to say, I'm taking like my standard, I'd say, standard thickness sections. I've had to go down a little bit and take even deeper U-shaped partings for those with very fine hair. And then I have a little bit more of a thickness placement that I will do later on, that you guys will see too. And if you're curious about the type of hair that we got, so like I said, these are I-tips, obviously. We did the body wave texture just to give it a little bit of extra wave. And I will be talking later on about like curly hair prep and all that kind of stuff. 20 inches. And so because of that, the 20 inches with Bellamy, I also then use the 3.2 millimeter beads, just as like going along with their bead guide, basically. The beads were espresso brown, and the color of the extensions was off black. So, what I kind of wanted to talk about, though, I first wanted to talk about just like a few I-tip techniques, tips that I kind of have. And with that, I always like to give the disclaimer. I gave the disclaimer in the last extension video I had. Please don't watch the singular video and go off and do an I-tip client if you are not familiar, if you haven't received any education on it. Same thing, I don't really expect, in my color videos, I don't expect people to like watch that one singular video and do a color service on someone. This is more so for like people that are looking for continued education, or if you're like curious about, extensions, and this is a service that you may want to get into, and you're just trying to like see what the process is like, or if you haven't done I-tips in a while, you need a refresher, like I said, things like that. But if you are looking to get into extensions, I'm not going to be giving like a step-by-step of like, here's how to install an I-tip, because, that's something that you need to go and like take a class for, whether you do that with someone individually or you take it through a brand, or, whatever that looks like. But we're not going to do that here with me today. And before I get into the I-tip technique tips, I want to kind of demonstrate too, since I was just talking about it. Up here, we're getting to the crown area of the head, and this is where I'm going to have to start taking a little bit of smaller sections, because her texture is a little bit thicker. So that means that her strands are simply a little bit thicker, and they take up more surface area. So I don't need as much of her singular strands to like hold the I-tip in place, if that makes sense. And so you kind of can see right here, sorry, I know it's kind of going out of focus a little bit, but you can kind of see my U-shaped partings are a little bit smaller. And what you even see there is, that's me realizing that there still is too much hair for that section. And how you can tell that is if you try to put the extension in, and if it's not seamlessly like going in through the bead. If you have to put any sort of like force with the extension in through the bead, there's too much natural hair in that bead to like safely keep both the natural hair and the extension hair intact. So you absolutely have to take things out and just resection, and just don't use as much hair. It's very common. You're going to see me do that multiple times. Look, I did it again, because especially since I was basically trying to figure out like, okay, how much hair do I really need to have? Because it's a drastic, what feels like a drastic difference from what I had, done a couple rows back to what I'm doing now. And so it's very important though, too, to make sure that you only have the exact amount, like it's very important to make sure that you have the appropriate amount of hair per each section. And that's why it can fluctuate row to row to row, because everyone's textures change and everyone's densities especially change row to row to row. If you have too much hair holding in with the bead and the extension, there's a couple different things that can happen. One, that's just asking for damage and breakage and unnecessary shedding. That won't be noticed until like after the extensions are taken out, because obviously that hair won't be shedding out, you know, as the extension's in. Also too, if there is too much hair holding an extension, if it gets too heavy, that is asking for unnecessary slippage as well. Which I-tips are already a higher slippage type of extension. I have just come to learn that. And I do just make sure my clients know that within reason though too. Like they're, you know, someone that's having their hair slipping out after, you know, a couple weeks, that's a little unnormal. Don't mind my dog barking in the background if you can hear her. But then also too, what can happen is if you have, and this was something that I learned the hard way too. If you do have too much hair installed, if you have too much of the natural hair installed, then even if the beads don't slip out, when you go to do their move up, it's going to be practically impossible to do a smooth, seamless move up, and it's going to take extra long because you're going to have a hard time getting the bead properly open and getting the I-tip like installed back in and then properly closing it. It takes like literally twice as long. I've learned that the hard way, and that's why I make sure to truly put in the appropriate amount of hair per bead. So with that, some of the things to keep in mind to try to like make sure you bypass those issues is you want to make sure that you're not taking hair anything that would be wider than how the bead would be when it's closed. That's typically a good guide. And that's where if you do need to add more hair, then you just want to make your U-shaped partings deeper and just draw the hair down more vertically versus like taking like wider sections, if that makes sense. And then another thing is too, like I keep saying, is if your I-tip gets installed seamlessly into the bead, great. If it's not, and if you're having to use a little bit of force and finagling, that's a telltale sign that it is not going to be, that's going to be too much hair, and that you need to take some hair out and just redo it again. On the flip side, if you're like, well, how do I tell if there's not enough hair? A little guide that I've learned, I didn't necessarily learn this in a class. By the way, sorry that this goes in and out of focus, but I didn't really learn this in a class, but it's something that I've just learned on my own, is when you are putting the bead in with the natural hair, if it doesn't, so you see me kind of using my finger to hold this up. When you put the extension hair in with the natural hair, if the bead seems to like only be truly being held up at the point of attachment, truly just by your fingers, and if you like kind of like move your fingers out of the way, if the natural hair, if the bead is being held up fine by the natural hair and the extensions, then you're good. If the bead instantly slips out when you move your finger, then you probably don't have enough hair holding it up. Like I said, that's just something that I've learned. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but that's a little guide that I've used to kind of see, because it's definitely just one of those things that I feel like you kind of have to use like a trained eye to be used to. And that's why I'm so passionate about people taking models for extension services before they like fully dive into, and multiple models multiple times. And I even, like, for example, when I was doing K-tips and I-tips, I took models for both services, multiple people as multiple models, and then I also had them be models for like, I think, move ups up until like the first full cycle is done, which for I-tips it's like you do a couple standard move ups and then you do a removal reinstall, and then after I had them all through the removal reinstall, which is what I kind of call like, the typical maintenance cycle, and then when they were on like the second part of the maintenance cycle, then I was ready and comfortable to take more clients on. I'm actually starting to get into doing hand-tied wefts or sew-in extensions, and I'm basically doing the same thing. I have one of my coworkers is having me do her wefts, and her move-up's coming up, and so I'm going to basically do removals and reinstalls on her until I'm comfortable with it. So that's one thing that I really recommend. That's what makes the iTip process so seamless, and then also too prevents unnecessary slippage. A note about slippage, some things that I've learned when it does come to slippage is I feel like anything around like the 4 to 5 week, like clients are gonna notice the beads slipping out a little bit more. It is a beaded method, so I think it is just a little inevitable, especially people with finer hair. I will say my client right here, since she does have thicker hair, she doesn't necessarily like lose them a ton. It's normally, the other thing too that I've learned is after a couple move ups, when they're getting closer, like this was going to be her removal reinstall anyway. So that's where we're like, well, we might as well just go ahead and get you new hair now. That is where you will notice a little bit more of the, slippage of the extensions, which is, again, it's honestly, I feel like it's pretty normal. I always tell people, if they know that their hair is not being compromised, if they see like the bulbs of their hair at top, because that's just an obvious sign that it is just that they've had just excess hair shedding at that time. And that's why for iTips, I really don't recommend them coming in anything longer. 8 weeks is like the absolute max. I normally say 5 to 6 weeks, and then anything longer, closer to 7 to 8. If there's a lot that have been that have fallen out, then there's a chance that like they'll just have to be charged half for like a removal reinstall and half for a move up, is basically what I say. And then anything after 8 weeks is an automatic removal reinstall if they didn't end up coming in for a move up in between. Just for like the safety of their hair, because especially since extension beads are a little bit heavier too, if they get too long, then that's way too heavy on their hair, and that can cause unnecessary breakage and damage, basically. Some other installation tips that I have for smooth, seamless installs is I like to keep my loop tool as close to the base of their hair as much as possible. When I learned, and that might be an obvious to some people, but when I learned, I remember like that wasn't really elaborated, and I see people, like I was watching, a bunch of like continued education videos, and I feel like I see a lot of extensionists, and they're not really like that mindful, and they might like kind of have their like loop tool like a couple inches down off their base, but I feel like that's just asking for like the hair to get like snagged and crosshairs to come into play. It also, I feel like, would take me even longer then to like even just loop the hair in through, because I feel like then when the hair was longer, it wouldn't, I don't know, something about when the hair is just like a little longer and you're using the loop tool, I feel like just having to like push the bead up more, and then the hair just wouldn't like seamlessly and smoothly go through the loop tool either. So I've learned, if you guys kind of see, even just like right up here, like I keep the loop tool basically like right at the base of their scalp, and that helps to make the hair just like literally just like glide through. What I also like to do with that too is, hold on, I'm gonna slow things down really quick. Okay, so what you're gonna see, I'm doing this in slow-mo just really quick because it's just easier to show you. So you have your iTip section here, and I'm just kind of like fine-tuning, getting all the crosshairs out, and then I like to lift the hair up really quick while I get the loop tool installed, and then as you see, I kind of like push it to the side, and that helps me be able to like push my loop tool as close to the base and be able to like, I feel like then when I push it kind of like out of the way a little bit, I'm able to seamlessly push my loop tool up to my base, and then I'm able to like kind of like grab the hair easily and pull it back through the loop tool, and it just keeps everything, like I said, just like seamlessly going through. I was having issues like when I was first new to doing extensions with like the hair getting kind of like tangled in with like like the hair that wasn't going to be put in through the loop tool. So I feel like keeping things on base and kind of like isolating the natural hair out of the way was like game changer for me. All right, so like I was saying earlier, my client has naturally pretty curly hair, so some things that I like to do, I have quite a few clients that have naturally pretty curly hair that wear extensions. So a couple things I like to do with them is, like I said earlier, I will get the Body Wave Texture by Bellamy. It's not permed hair or anything by any means. I am hoping that they come out with some curly hair extensions soon. I am literally dying. But in the meantime, I've just been opting for the body wave texture. And what it is it's like kind of like steam pressed into like a little bit more of a wave. So what sucks with it is that it's not like permanent, but it does kind of give just like a little bit of extra texture to the hair. It's better than nothing. I have not found my favorite curly hair extension brand. So side note, if you have any, let me know. But honestly, most of my clients have it easier where they just blow out their hair. I don't have anyone really that has curly hair that wants length or wants extensions anyway. So yeah, all my clients that have naturally curly hair that wear extensions are blowing it out. So a couple things I like to do with them is, like I said, get the body wave texture. And then I also strongly recommend them get some type of professional smoothing treatment too, i.e. like a Brazilian blowout or some type of keratin smoothing treatment before getting the extensions in, just because that helps to like just make their texture a little bit more manageable. Because if curly hair with extensions, while it's obviously extremely possible, you do have to be extra considerate of your hair, basically, because, you know, smoothing out your hair, all of our hair is obviously, you know, anyone with curly hair, obviously the base and root of the extensions is kind of where you're going to be the most curly at and the most frizzy at, and that's where your extensions are like living too, especially like the base of the extension. So there's just a lot going on in the roots of the hair. So having a Brazilian blowout, while it won't make your roots permanently straight or anything by any means, it does just make things a little bit more manageable. Plus, then it does just help the textures to just, they're not going to completely match. At the end of the day, extension hair is manufactured hair. While it is human hair, it has been manufactured and gone through a process to be extensions. So they're not going to feel, even someone that has naturally straight hair, you know, the textures are going to feel a little different, right? So while that's completely normal, you do just want things to be the most manageable for someone that has just it's going to be two drastically different textures, basically. Really quick too, while I'm down here working on the back, I wanted to give you guys just some context of what I'm doing in this back area. All in her front, I did all of her extensions. I placed them all back to back for the most part. On eye tips, because of it being a bead, I do like to leave just little slivers of hair in between, just to make it a little bit easier for detangling. K-tips, you can pack them in back to back, but I don't really like to do that with beads. So I packed everything in as close as I was comfortable with. Here in the back, I'm not going to nearly as much. This row back here, just because this is her nape row, her density is extra fine back here. So I'm going to do what I call like basically like half thick of rows or whatever. I'm going to leave basically like 1 to 2, I'm going to leave basically like 1 to 2 imaginary eye tips of like space in between each actual eye tip bond that I install. I do that here in this nape area, and then the very first row that I do on top of it, I'm going to do a full row. So I'll say we'll call this like a half row. I did 1 half row here at the nape, and then I did 2 full rows up top. I don't end up filming all of it because my battery was starting to die and I wanted to recharge it a little bit before I got into like the blending and the finishing. But it's basically the same process that I did up top and through the sides. Now, since her sides and her top were thicker, so that's why I didn't have to do any half rows. That's why I just opted to do all full rows. But her back and her top, her back area, the nape and her crown are a little bit finer. So that's where I did a half row back here. I did through the interior of her back, I did 2 full rows, and then I did 2 half rows at her top part of her crown area. And I kind of used that. She really only needed 1 half row, but then I had a little bit of extra hair. So what I was able to do was use that additional hair for an extra half row that was just able to be like even more blending, basically. But anyway, so going back to curly hair prepping, like I said, smoothing services is going to be helpful. I also too just like to communicate with them what the practicalities is going to be with them taking care of their hair. I don't recommend extensions to people that like don't regularly blow out their hair anyway. If they're ones that are like, oh, I have curly hair and like I wear up half the time, you know, with someone that has like not curly hair, then kind of get away with that. But with curly hair, you already have the chance of matting half the time anyway when you're not brushing your curly hair. So if you're not taking care, like if you're not taking care of your hair already without extensions, I'm not going to recommend it to someone that, you know, is going to be willing to put extensions in their head. That's just not worth it. So here I am finishing up this half row, basically back in through here. And you guys can kind of see the amount of space I like to leave out. So like I said, it's probably like 1 to 2 eye tips worth, basically. I like to do this in spots that, like I say, like don't necessarily need full rows. And you can kind of tell that by how thick their hair kind of seems to be towards the ends of their hair. So the top part of her hair, kind of like her hair gets a little bit finer towards the ends in her crown. It still has like that same thickness up top that I was saying. So that's where up top, you know, that's where I have to do a little bit more of like a thick hair placement per each bond. But I don't need as many bonds as I would in the spots where she has like fuller hair on her ends. So the perimeter part of her hair is thinner, but the base part of her hair is thicker. So that's why it's so important to like understand hair texture and hair density when you're going in with extensions, because both of those things like matter a lot with putting extensions in. Because like I mean, you can like I very well could have just like made 2 full rows right up here, but it definitely would have made it look a little bit more like manufactured, because her natural hair is not as dense on the ends as that would have like replicated. It would have been like too much fake hair, essentially. It would have like gave too much coverage, and that's where it could have like looked like a wig, basically. And because I am a texture specialist myself, I am very passionate about when I'm installing extensions, making it look, while it's going to be enhancing their overall look, I want it to replicate like how it would naturally look if it was like growing out of their head. I was incredibly out of focus for this, but I still want to include it in. I'll make sure to do a better in focus video on extension cutting later on, but I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of a guide because you can still kind of see. But we didn't have to do too much with her anyway, and that's where I say when you install extensions going off of their natural growth pattern, you don't have to do nearly as much with blending. Like I'm just cleaning up her ends, which I like to clean up the ends of extensions by doing a lot of slide cutting. Point cutting I feel like can kind of look a little choppy. I will like point cut to refine, but I don't like to point cut for the entirety of it. I feel like slide cutting is where it really like helps for it to look like soft, but yet still like, I don't know, like not like, I feel like the point cutting just kind of makes it like a big old chunk, honestly. And then some very slight face framing. I liked the density that she had up front, and I didn't really want to like take too much of that away. So I slide cut for some layers, and then I gave her a slight face frame, and I gave her some very slight like face framing layers, which is kind of what you guys see me doing right through here. But they were very subtle, very low key. I just kind of like picked up spots that I felt like could use maybe just like a little bit of softness and kind of went through there. And you kind of see me doing this in the back too. I kind of just like pick up and will basically just like slide cut down. Like I said, it just kind of sucks. So this is very incredibly out of focus. So it just, I wish, because you would have been able to see if it was more in focus. You would have been able to like truly see the transformation of it looking like extensions to it looking truly like her natural hair. But oh well, we'll do that for another video. But just as a reminder, here is her before and here is my girls after. It looks so good. I cannot wait to be at her wedding next month. And I just can't get over it. We styled her hair kind of in like the natural, we just like emphasized the little beach wave thing she had going on. and went on from there. This was so fun to do. Chris, if you're watching this, I love you so much. But anyway, I hope you guys learned something new. Thank you guys so much for watching this whole long video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.